But Baalbek, if there was one example, one ancient site on Earth that is evidence of a lost, ancient, advanced civilization, Baalbek has the largest stones that were ever quarried in human history, the largest stones that were lifted, stacked, and transported in human history, and the largest stone columns in all of classical history.
You know, there are places on our planet that just, they don't make sense. Places where everything we think we know about physics, about history, just completely falls apart. And deep in the Bekaa Valley of Lebanon, there's one of these places. It's a monument to an ambition so huge, a power so incredible, it feels less like something humans built and more like a scar left on the world by giants. This is the story of Baalbek. And honestly, what you're about to see, it just shouldn't be possible. So right at the base of what looks like a Roman temple, you find them. Three massive, monolithic blocks of limestone. They make up this retaining wall that is just beyond comprehension. They call them the trilithon, and each one is a single, solid piece of stone. Now get this, each one is estimated to weigh 800 tons. That's 1.6 million pounds for each block. It's almost impossible to wrap your head around that kind of weight. So let's try this. Picture 5 fully loaded Boeing 737s. All of them. That's the weight of one of these stones. I mean, think about today. Our biggest, most powerful mobile cranes, the absolute beasts of modern engineering, they would just buckle. Under absolutely perfect conditions, the very best crane on Earth might be able to lift about 20% of that. And yet, there they are. But, you know, it's not just the weight. It's where they are that just shatters everything we think we know about the past. See, these blocks aren't just sitting on the ground. No, they were lifted more than 20 feet into the air and then placed perfectly on top of a lower layer of smaller, well, smaller still means massive, foundation stones. It's a puzzle that engineers have been obsessed with for centuries. How in the world do you lift 800 tons of dead weight 2 stories high with what we're told were ancient, primitive tools? And the mystery just gets deeper when you get up close and look at the craftsmanship. The seams. I mean, where these gigantic blocks meet, it's a level of precision that is just unexplainable. The joints are so perfect, so flush, that you can't even slide a razor blade between them in most places. Forget about a piece of paper. And there's no mortar holding them together. It's just stone on stone, locked in place by their own incredible weight and a skill that feels, well, it feels almost supernatural. For more than 100 years now, archaeologists, engineers, historians, they've all taken a shot at it. They've come up with theories, drawn up plans, built models, but not a single one has ever really, truly explained it. The proof is just sitting there, silent, unmoving, leaving us with the same huge questions that have been hanging over this place for thousands of years. Who could even think of something like this? What kind of technology did they have to actually pull it off? And why? What was the whole point of it all? And if we want to find those answers, we have to look way beyond Lebanon. Because what we're seeing at Baalbek, well, it's not a one-off. It's not just some weird, isolated thing. It's one incredible clue in a much bigger global mystery. It's a pattern, a kind of blueprint for massive stone construction that's been hidden in plain sight all over the world. And it points to a lost chapter of our own history, a chapter that connects ancient cultures in ways that, frankly, the official story just won't even consider. Okay, so the official story, the one you'll read in pretty much any textbook, is that the Romans built Baalbek. And, you know, at first that makes sense. You look at the site and you see these incredible ruins of some of the biggest Roman temples ever constructed. Temples to Jupiter, Bacchus, Venus. It feels Roman, right? The massive scale, the grand columns. But there's a problem with that story. A really, really big one. See, the thing about the Romans is that they were obsessive record keepers. I mean, they wrote everything down, especially their big building projects. They were so proud of them. We have super detailed accounts of how they built the Colosseum, their aqueducts, you name it. And yet, when you search through the entire library of Roman history, there is this deafening silence about the Trilithon. Not one text, not one inscription, not even a passing comment about quarrying, moving, and lifting the 3 biggest blocks in the entire ancient world. For the Romans, that's not just weird, it's impossible. Unless, of course, they didn't do it. And you know what? The stones themselves tell the story. They point to 2 completely different builders. Roman buildings all follow a very specific set of rules, based on their standard unit of measurement, the Roman foot. But when you analyze the huge foundation stones at Baalbek, you find a totally different system. The proportions, the dimensions, the whole style of the stonework, it's completely foreign to anything the Romans did. It looks like the work of two different cultures, separated by a huge gap in time and, it seems, technology. And there's more. We know exactly how the Romans lifted their big stones. They carved these special holes into the blocks, called Lewis holes. Then they'd stick an iron pin in there so their cranes could get a solid grip. You see these marks, the signature of Roman engineering, on their buildings all over the world. But here's the thing. On the trilithon stones and on that whole massive foundation, there are no Lewis holes. Zero. Not a single one. So you have to ask yourself, how were the Romans planning to lift blocks they literally had no way to grab onto? But the final nail in the coffin for this theory really comes down to simple physics. The biggest, baddest Roman cranes, these huge things powered by tons of men walking in giant hamster wheels, they had a maximum lift capacity of about 60 tons, which, for the time, was incredible. But the trilithon stones weigh 800 tons each. That means a single block is more than 13 times heavier than the absolute max limit of Roman tech. It's not just a little bit heavier, it's in a completely different category. It's not even playing the same sport. But maybe the most convincing evidence of all is carved right there by time itself. I'm talking about geology. The lower blocks, the really big megalithic ones, they show really clear signs of heavy erosion from wind and water. You can see deep pitting, a lot of wear and tear that just screams immense age. But the Roman stonework that's built right on top of it, it's in much better shape, almost pristine by comparison. The difference is stark. It tells us that the foundation was already an ancient weathered ruin for thousands of years before the first Roman soldier ever even saw it. So when you look at all the evidence together, you're left with this one unavoidable conclusion. The Romans didn't build the platform at Baalbek. They found it. And they must have thought it was incredible, sacred even. So they built their own temples on top of it, claiming this holy ground for themselves, probably without having any idea who built it in the first place. They were just inheriting a legacy, left behind by a civilization that has been completely wiped from the history books. So, if it wasn't the Romans, then who was it? To even start to answer that, we have to face the brutal physical reality of what they did. The journey for these stones started in a quarry about half a mile away from the temple site. And the path between the quarry and the temple, well, it wasn't a nice flat road. It was an uphill climb over some really rough, difficult ground. We have to come back to that staggering weight again, 800 tons. That's like 130 big pickup trucks, or almost 400 grand pianos. Just think about that. Even the most generous estimates from academics, just based on pure muscle power, say you'd need at least 40,000 men, all pulling together in perfect sync, just to get one of these things to move an inch. 40,000 people. That's a bigger population than almost any city in the ancient world, all working on one single task. But even that crazy number is just a theory. In the real world, the physics just don't work. People have tried to replicate this. Modern experiments using blocks that are way, way smaller, like only 40 tons, have all ended in total disaster. The strongest ropes you can make from natural fibers, they snap like taut and thread. Huge wooden rollers, they get crushed into splinters. The forces involved are just too much for any kind of organic material they would have had back then. And listen, that's just the problem of dragging them across the ground. The even bigger challenge was lifting them 20 feet straight up. We already figured out a Roman crane can lift maybe 60 tons. So simple math tells you that you'd need at least 13 of their biggest cranes all working at the same time in perfect harmony. But just look at the site. It's built against a hill. There's literally no room to set up 13 giant cranes, not to mention the thousands of people and animals you'd need to run them. It's physically impossible. The geometry just doesn't allow it. And somehow, this impossible job was done with incredible finesse. The stones don't show any signs of a struggle. The edges are still sharp, completely undamaged. There aren't any cracks from being dropped, no chips from being pushed and pried into place. It's like they were set down with the gentle touch of a watchmaker, even though they weigh more than a freight train. It had to be a perfect placement on the very first try. The mystery doesn't stop at the temple, though. Oh no. You go to the quarry, and that's where things get truly bizarre, because just lying there in the ground is an even bigger stone. It's fully cut, fully shaped, but it was never moved. It's called the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, and its weight isn't 800 tons, it's 1,000. 1,000 tons. It was all ready to go, but it never made the trip. It was just left there. And just when you think it can't get any crazier, Deeper in that same quarry, they just recently found another one. This is it, the single largest cut stone block ever discovered on Earth. They call it the Forgotten Stone, and it weighs, it's hard to even say it, 1,650 tons. It's still partly stuck to the bedrock, looking like the workers just dropped their tools in the middle of the day and walked off the job forever. I mean, what on earth could happen that would make them suddenly and completely abandon the biggest construction project in the history of the world? Well, the answer might actually be carved right into the stones. If you look really closely at these megaliths, both at the temple and back in the quarry, you see something that just feels wrong. It doesn't belong in the ancient world. On the surfaces, there are these weird, perfectly parallel lines, these grooves. These aren't the kind of rough, random marks you'd get from banging on it with a copper chisel. They're way too uniform, too precise. They look like they were made by some kind of machine. And this is where the whole mystery just goes global. Because these strange, machine-like tool marks, they're not just at Baalbek. We find the exact same marks at other ancient stone sites all over the planet. In a quarry in China, all over the ancient city of Petra in Jordan, on the giant blocks in Peru. It's like a technological fingerprint. And that fingerprint perfectly matches the marks left by modern industrial saws, a kind of technology that just had no business existing thousands of years ago. The case for this lost technology gets even stronger when you look at the granite columns at the site. Now, this granite came from a quarry in Aswan, Egypt. That's 700 miles away, and it's one of the hardest rocks you can find. To cut through it, you need tools that are even harder. And on little broken pieces of these columns, scientists have found tiny traces of iron oxide, rust basically, fused deep inside the cut marks. That suggests they were using advanced iron saws hundreds, maybe thousands of years before the start of the official Iron Age. So all this evidence, it forces you to zoom out and start connecting the dots around the world. Let's go 7,000 miles away from Lebanon, high up in the Andes Mountains of Peru. There's a place called Sacsayhuaman, and it shows the exact same building style. Huge, weirdly shaped blocks, some over 200 tons, all fitted together perfectly like a puzzle, with that same impossible, no-mortar precision we see at Baalbek. We're talking about two cultures, supposedly completely separate, on different sides of an ocean, sharing this incredibly advanced and unique building style. And guess what? The pattern shows up again in Egypt. Inside the Great Pyramid, the king's chamber is built with 70-ton granite blocks. And they came from that same Aswan quarry as the columns in Baalbek, and they're cut with a precision of 1/100th of an inch. And then you go to Abydos, to this underground structure called the Osirion. It's built from 100-ton blocks, and geologists have dated it to thousands of years before the first pharaohs. It's the exact same pattern as Baalbek, a later famous civilization building their stuff right on top of a much older, much more advanced foundation. I mean, even on Easter Island, the most remote inhabited spot on the entire planet, you find the same architectural DNA. Everyone knows about the giant statues, the moai, but what people often miss are the platforms they stand on, called ahu. And these platforms are built with that same impossible, tight-fitting polygon-style stonework that we see in Peru and at the foundation of Baalbek. It's a global fingerprint, a forgotten building code. But it's not just how they built these places, it's why. There's another deeper connection. It turns out that almost all of these sites are also incredibly precise astronomical observatories. They're lined up with stunning accuracy to the solstices, the equinoxes, to the exact rising and setting of certain stars. So these weren't just temples or fortresses. They were complex scientific instruments. They were clocks and calendars built on a planetary scale. And it gets weirder. When you actually map these sites out on a globe, you start to see these bizarre mathematical and geographic connections between them. For instance, the latitude of the Great Pyramid is 29.9792458 degrees north. The speed of light is 299,792,458 meters per second. Same number. Is that a coincidence? I don't know, maybe. But when you get dozens of coincidences like that, they stop looking like chance and they start looking like a deliberate design. The evidence really points to some kind of global network, a worldwide system built by a civilization that knew a whole lot about science and the stars. And that brings us all the way back to the quarry at Baalbek and those silent, unfinished giants. That sudden stop, the fact that they just walked away from it all, that's the master clue. They didn't just slow down or finish the job with smaller stones. No, they abandoned it instantly. It's like they knew for a fact that they were never coming back. That speaks to something big, something that wasn't just a local problem, but a global one, a cataclysm. And you know what? In the last few decades, more and more scientific evidence has piled up for exactly that kind of event. Right at the end of the last ice age, about 12,000 years ago, our planet went through this period of incredibly violent, catastrophic climate change. It's called the Younger Dryas. Geologists have found evidence for massive, unbelievable floods, and they've found this thin layer of dust all across 4 continents that's full of stuff from space, nanodiamonds, iridium, things that point to a massive comet impact. For the people and animals living at the time, it was basically a world-ending event. So you have to ask the question, what if all those flood myths, and there are over 500 of them from cultures all over the world, what if they aren't myths at all? What if they're the distant, faded memories of a real event? The shared collective trauma of the people who survived when their advanced world was literally washed away. This one theory, it could explain everything. That the megalithic builders were part of a highly advanced global civilization that was wiped out by that cataclysm 12,000 years ago. Their biggest stone structures survived. The few scattered survivors, cultures that would become the early Egyptians, the Sumerians, the Romans, they weren't the originators. They were the inheritors. And they built their own, less advanced worlds on top of the ruins of a past that was so great, they couldn't even understand it anymore. Now, mainstream archaeology and history have a really hard time with this evidence because it completely shatters their nice, neat story of human progress, from caveman to us. And when they're faced with evidence that doesn't fit their model, their first instinct is usually to just ignore the evidence instead of questioning their model. But that's not science, that's dogma. The problem isn't that there's no evidence for a lost civilization. The problem is the mindset that refuses to see it. So the stones of Baalbek, they aren't a Roman masterpiece. They're an inheritance. They're a message, left for us in the most permanent way possible. A message from a world that was lost beneath the waves. They were built by people who, maybe, just maybe, knew their time was up. And they wanted to leave something behind that couldn't be denied. Something that would survive anything. And in that, they absolutely succeed. It's like we're a species with amnesia. And only now, as we start to put all of these clues together, are we finally beginning to read the message they left. And the message is that history isn't this straight line of progress. It's a cycle. Great civilizations can rise and they can fall. So the real question isn't just who built Baalbek. It's what else about our own past have we completely forgotten? And more importantly, what can we learn from a civilization that built for eternity as we now face the great challenges of our own time?